I know we talked a little bit about this, Buck. Yesterday, Trump announced a idea for tariffs for movies, and it has provoked a ton of response. And I think this is very interesting, the idea, and I actually don't dislike it. And let me explain why in a little bit more detail. Uh, Interestingly, there was an article that came out. I think it was in the New York Times, and I'm betting Trump read it. And it was an article, or his staff read it. It was an article that dealt with the collapse of jobs in the movie industry in the Los Angeles area in particular. And there were several people who had worked on film and television for years and years that basically said, hey, there's no jobs here anymore. And you mentioned, Buck, that you can now go to Europe and make movies cheaper all over Europe, which certainly has crazy tax rates, than you can in the United States. Was it Hungary in particular that you were citing,
Yes.
Budapest, where you could go?
Well, it's actually, I think, Rob Lowe in a podcast talking
Yeah.
about this, a guy who's been in the business for like 50 years. And he said it's cheaper to do a show or a movie in Eastern Europe. Think about that, though. It's not that you're using Eastern European crews, maybe somewhat, to fly all of the cast and the director and the this and the that and everything over there, put them up in hotels, do all of that, than to use empty studio lots in Los Angeles right now. Think about that.
Yeah, so I think this is actually a good explanation of how offshoring has worked even for high-end industry. And I want you to think about this for a minute. They're doing oftentimes this movie making and this television making in countries with much higher tax rates than the United States. So initially, it was a lot of people started to move to Vancouver. Canada was giving huge advantages for making film and movies, television and movies in Canada, even though Canada, as you heard Trump talking about earlier, as a country has much higher rates on average of taxes than people do in the United States. And then European countries. England has, for instance, built up, I think they did all the Star Wars movies and I think all the Harry Potter movies on huge studios that they have built outside of London. Well, we all know English taxes are much higher than they are in the United States. And so Trump looked at this and he is saying, well, this is not ideal. We need to be producing American movies in the United States. And I don't think he's wrong on that. And there has been some pushback because I think even people in Hollywood are kind of a little bit skeptical over this, but it is the same thing that has happened in Midwest with factory jobs. As I told you yesterday, a lot of these people that are working on movies, they're blue collar workers. I know people think, oh, it's Hollywood. Oh, it's movies. That's a lot of, super rich limousine people. And yeah, if you're a movie star, you make a lot of money, but the monies that are spent on films trickle down in a huge way to the guy that's making a set and sitting there with a saw, to the person who's got to be pretty physically strong that's running around with a mobile camera. And I've talked about, as a guy who did television in LA for years, I have met a lot of the cast and crew that are involved in producing television. I'm telling y'all, a lot of them are big Trump supporters. So this has, I think, a really interesting conversation aspect to it, Trump, because it creates unnatural or unexpected political alliances.
Well, if you think about somebody like the Key Grip, right, who is involved with rigging for camera movements and the physical, mechanical components of the camera guys, the lighting guys and gals, but a lot of them are going to be more sympathetic to, let's say, the Trump and capitalist point of view. It's really the producers, the actors, and the writers' room where you tend to have much of the communist stuff.
So, not surprisingly, many people have missed this aspect, which is just, hey, we should be onshoring. That is making even more movies in America that are designed for Americans instead of shipping them overseas. Let's figure out how to do that in the most capitalistic way imaginable, right? Whoopi Goldberg is mad at Trump over trying to come up with a solution here. On The View, she decided to instead say, hey, this is what's going to happen. Listen to this.
Okay, look, you can't do that, because what that equates to is you're going to tell me how to write the story I want to write if it happens in Europe. You're telling me that if my book comes out and I want to write it, you're telling me how to write it. You're telling me you're going to charge me for that. Well, you know, could you, look, could you please lower the price of eggs before you start this?
Okay, the price of eggs is their talking point. It's actually going to be near a historic low. They're at wholesale prices now. The prices that you pay in grocery stores are coming down. But she just doesn't I mean, this is embarrassing, I think, for someone who should be in entertainment and making movies. Trump is not saying you can't set a book in Europe, you moron. He's saying, hey, American movies that are set in America shouldn't be filmed on European sound stages, paying Europeans to make American films. The reason Los Angeles exists as a movie capital is historically because it rains so irregularly and the weather is so good by and large, you could film on more days than almost anywhere else in the United States, and therefore Tinseltown developed. I think continuing to produce American movies in America is actually a really good goal because it gives Americans jobs to entertain Americans by producing these films.
Well, also, I would just point out, clearly, a lot of states are already hip to this, if you will. They get it because there's because they compete with each other for this business, right? I mean, I think it hasn't been something I've looked at in a while, but states like Georgia, I think South Carolina, there are states that gave some pretty hefty tax breaks to movie productions because they realize it brings a lot of good stuff into the state, a lot of dollars, a lot of attention. Maybe too much attention. I feel like some of you who live in Montana after the Yellowstone series are like, stop buying up outside of Bozeman. But that obviously affects the real estate markets. I mean, there's a lot to be said for bringing these productions into these places. And I think about something like New York City. So many great, iconic movies and TV shows were filmed in New York when I was growing up in New York. And a lot of people felt like they knew New York City from watching those, even if they grew up in Oklahoma. Well, That's not happening the same way anymore. And it's nonsense. And the fact that it's not even happening in California, the home of the movie industry, or really kind of the original birthplace of the movie industry, is something that is clearly indicative of how bad policy is. This is not a free market thing. This is a bad policy thing. And it's because California's wage and just job regulations and taxation are completely out of control.
Yeah, look, I think that's totally true. And California's got its own issues. I don't have a problem with Georgia deciding, hey, we're going to produce our own studio system. I think a lot of that actually emanated, if I'm not mistaken, from Tyler Perry, who had tremendous success making movies and television shows. And he said, hey, I'm from Atlanta. I want to build my own studio here. And I think there are going to be a lot of challenges. I saw quotes from Tyler Perry talking about, hey, man, I don't know exactly what needs to be built going forward, because I'm sure you've seen some of this, Buck, and certainly you guys have had fun with doing AI versions of us. But the ability of special effects with AI, it's going to make the making of films, in particular special effects, far more affordable. And that's different in terms of how the jobs are going to be associated there with a lot of the challenges that I think exist now, which is we shouldn't be competing with London for whether it's more affordable to make an American movie here or in London or in any other European country.
You want to talk about, in a sense, the incentives, countries like Portugal and Hungary, and some of these are not. Portugal's not a rich country. A lot of Americans are moving there because it's actually such a good. Your dollar goes so far; it's become a popular. Producer Allie just went there. She said it was amazing. I actually really want to go. Side note, but these countries, Clay, when they're giving incentives, it's kind of like a reverse tariff, right? And when you start to think about it that way, you see that this is a game that people are playing in a whole range of ways. If you bring a movie to, let's say you're going to film a movie in Portugal, and they're going to say, hey, we're going to give you the following financial incentives for you to make your movie here. Well, it's very similar to the mindset of we're going to have a tariff on external movies so that you'll make them here in America, right? They're just, this is just cash exchanging hands one way or another to create an incentive structure. And I think that with the movie industry, the TV industry, this is the one thing I might add that just traditional America needs to make. This is where we really need to push now, because the time has never been more ripe, more clear, and more obvious, I think, for a film studio / TV, some kind of a production house that's not going to make stuff that is necessarily like right wing or conservative, but that will appeal to the broadest possible audience, which will inherently seem conservative compared to some of the slop they've been putting out on Netflix and Hulu in recent years.
I agree with that 100%. And let me just say again to Whoopi Goldberg, you moron, no one is saying if a movie's set in Paris that the movie shouldn't be shot in Paris, right?
Clay, she doesn't even read the news story she talks about on the show anymore. I mean, she's mailing it in. I've heard things from people who are around that world on The View that she doesn't really want to be there anymore. No, I'm being serious. She doesn't want to be there anymore. Doesn't want to do the homework if she ever did. And it just comes across now because what she's saying is so dumb that it's not even wrong.
Well, you would think of all of the subjects out there, Hollywood movies, given that she has been in Hollywood movies historically, would be
she was in some good ones. It's been 40 years, but she was in some good ones.
You would think that she would be able to intelligently talk about that, but instead she's so reflexively anti-Trump that even something that could make sense to help have more homegrown American jobs in the creative space, which I think is a good thing, she would be opposed to. It's just moronic. If anything, you can argue, and some of you may be of this disposition, I don't want to do anything for anybody that works in the movies because they're so left-wing and everything else. I understand that argument. I'm just telling you that having been out in LA a lot and having worked a lot in television and movies, I think you would be surprised. The actors and actresses get all the attention. They're going to be fine. They're super rich. But I think you'd be surprised by the regular guys and gals out there working on movies who love Donald Trump and just want to have a good job so they can take care of their families. We should have more of those in America.
And this is also a time when if you had the right group of conservative, and again, I just traditional, I would say traditional entertainment, not even, it's not about the politics. It's just about stories that are meant to inspire and appeal to people in the broadest possible way. The only stuff that even comes close to that has been like superhero movies for the past decade. Please don't send me. I love Kevin Sorbo and some of these people that have worked on more, independent projects and stuff, and they're doing the best that they can. I'm saying the big studios. I'm talking about what's getting made by Amazon and Netflix, and these are the places that are right. Apple TV. Clay, the time has never been better to get your, undaunted Lois and Clark expedition series in front of, because I think someone like a Jeff Bezos could tell the head of content at Amazon, hey, how about we make a kick-ass series that isn't about how you have to trans your 12-year-old? How about that?
Let me give credit here. These guys live in my neighborhood. Andrew and John Irwin, Andy and John Irwin, they've been doing tremendous jobs making movies in a lot of the arena that you're talking about, Buck. And what they've seen is the math on these has really kind of taken off. They did the best Christmas pageant ever. They did American Underdog. They did they've done a lot of different movies. I think we had them on. I Can Only Imagine, the Jesus music, the Jesus Revolution, and they're involved in a lot of these different. The new David documentary that I think is just not a documentary, but I mean it's based on a true life history in the Bible. It's killing it.
I love that Trump has gone after the stranglehold on elite academia with Harvard, et cetera. That's critical, and it's part of the long-term play of putting this country, back in a sane place. But Clay, entertainment industry.
Yep.
This is another place where we need to really make gains.
House of David, by the way, on Amazon Prime Video, that I am told is just really good and doing very, very well. When you find a market, guess what? Hollywood will support it as soon as they start making money, and then you get more of it. We've had a lot of wild weather here in Nashville. Makes you think about having a go bag, emergency kit of sorts if things get a little bit crazy. My wife has rapid radios. She keeps one of them in her car in case there is some sort of issue that might arise. And we have it set up in the house as well. These have a 5-day charge. You can charge it, and then she has it in the car in case suddenly she needs to get in touch with us and all the cell phone networks have gone down. Maybe you need to be thinking about that as well, given all of the different rapid craziness that we have seen take place. We talked about Buck's sister-in-law being in Asheville when the weather hit there and all the cell phone networks are down and you just want to be able to get in touch. These are modern day walkie-talkies. They can connect nationwide on an LTE network. One touch of a button, you're able to communicate across the country. Go to rapidradios.com right now, 60% off, plus free UPS shipping and a free protection bag at rapidradios.com. Again, that's rapidradios.com, 60% off, plus a free UPS shipping bag, and get hooked up right now. You're going to love them. Rapidradios.com, code radio.